So now that we understand inertia has a huge effect, geometry has a huge effect, how about the way the club is designed? How does that change the way that we take a backswing? Well, with the wedge, obviously there's a lot more weight in the toe. Toe is high up in the air. It's not down here like an iron. So what will happen is, as we swing the club back, it will want to turn itself completely over like this. Very simple, like so. And as we hit the ball, it wants to flip that way. So how do we maintain a stable club face when there's so much inertia already built into it? Well, that's part of the reason why wedges are upright. They're not flat like a driver or a mid iron or even a long iron. And in some cases, if you're shorter, you probably had your clubs flattened, which changes the entire inertia of a golf club, as well as the geometry of the swing plane. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit 4 different clubs. I'm just going to talk a little bit about how each one changes the swing plane and inertia naturally. So we already talked about the wedge. It's more upright. Therefore, as we swing up, we don't have to control the toe as much as long as it's on plane. So for those of you that are struggling, particularly if you're hitting it left, my guess is your hands are too low. And that is the only way, essentially, to hit it left, because if your hands are too low, the inertia of the club is going to cause it to flip at the bottom, like so. If your hands are more upright, the club will not flip as much. And that's because the inertia wants to go backwards. So, if you're struggling with your wedges and you're hitting them too far right, it's probably because you're too upright. And like I said, the more upright you are, the more the toe wants to hang back. What you should feel as you take the club up is everything is a straight line and it's linear. And the reason for that being is because you don't want a lot of open and closing of a wedge. Wedges are designed for control. So in this case, I have a 56 degree. Now I want to hit my stock shot. I'm not going to bring my hands low. I don't want to fade it up. I want it to be in line, which is essentially on plane for my spine. Of course, this is something you'll have to train, but let's see what this looks like. If you notice, it's a very straight ball flight. There's a little wind up there, so it moved it right, but I didn't have to control the golf club. Now, as we waggle a wedge, if we're waggling too low, it's going to want to turn over in our hands, right? We waggle it low, look at it, it turns over every single time. If we waggle it too upright, it won't turn over, or it'll turn over very late. So as you waggle it, what you're looking for is that it turns over square. That's why we waggle at the belt buckle. This is how we manage it. And again, this is your center of gravity for most people. So if the club plane matches your center of gravity, most likely you're not going to have to control the club face. You're just going to have to stabilize it, like so. Physics and geometry will do the rest for you. So with a wedge, belt buckle, waggle, stable club face until it's not flipping over. So that means you'll have to go up in the air. This is more upright. This is hands more down. As you get better at this, you'll be able to naturally do it so that everything falls in place for you. But you will have to practice it. It's the only thing you got to practice, but you don't need to hit balls to do that, do you? Now we have the 8 iron. Same rules apply. It's going to be slightly flatter than a wedge. So, as we waggle it from our belt buckle, we're going to find that inertia point. We then set it up perpendicular to our target line. In this case, because the waggle is on a downhill slope, I'm noticing that it wants to go rightward. So I move the ball position slightly back in my stance. Not a lot, just enough so that everything lines up on plane. And then I swing. Of course, that did come out lower because I'm on a downhill slope and I did move it back to my stance. If you're trying to manage a slope, in other words, you've got, let's say, a front pin behind a bunker and you can't hit it low, change our waggle so that the club face is open, which means we bring it up to set it. Now we're fighting the hill. Notice my waggle even gets a little shorter, and then we just swing on the hill. Inertia does everything else. We don't have to control it. Geometry and physics do all the rest of it. I'm not thinking about my golf swing at all. All I'm thinking about is the physics of the golf club. Next, we have a 4-iron. This 4-iron has offset, which makes it want to turn a lot more over than my other clubs because they are 0 offset. But it goes both directions. So all we have to do to manage that is be a little more upright. So as we waggle it, where we waggle it from, our center of gravity is going to be more in the, we'll call it our solar plexus area versus our belt buckle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Notice it's slightly shut. That's fine. We're just going to set it up how it is. Our stance will be slightly open. That's fine. That has to do with the inertia of the golf club. And then we're just going to swing it. Comes out low, goes slightly back in my stance and a little bit hooky because that's the physics of the golf club. From there, we can now learn how to manage that physics, right? We can change our grip to manage the physics. So now it'll never shut on me. But notice my thumb is down the left side of the shaft, which means my right hand's going to be really weak, or I'm going to have to set up open, which will change my plane. All of these things will have to be managed. But in the case of a club where you have offset, all you have to do to manage it is just set it at a higher angle. So now you can feel the toe being controlled. From there, you set up normally, and this should come off quite a bit higher. Like so. That even had a little fade to it with offset. Next, we have the big dog. It's very difficult to hit a driver off a downhill slope. So I'm actually going to aim this little right so that I'm hitting off a more neutral slope over here. I know how to do it, but for today's purposes, for training you guys, I'd rather be on a little more neutral surface. Alright, so this is aimed, we'll say roughly at the light pole in between the red and yellow flag. Again, same thing. We waggle until we have control of the club face. That's a flipped over club face. That's an open club face. That's stable. Bam, right there. Notice, with the driver, my grip is actually pretty weak. A lot of that has to do with the fact that there's very little inertia in the toe in the modern driver, and why most guys hit a fade with the modern driver. When you're doing the waggle, and you stabilize the club face, you start to realize there's only so many ways it can be held and stabilized, which in a way is kind of good. From there, we set everything up. Notice my shaft is now pointing towards my solar plexus because, again, very little inertia. I don't need to be down here to get it to flip because there's no inertia to it. It will stay on plane naturally. So we set it in our solar plexus. We square it up, find our ball position with our waggle, and then we swing. It appears I'm still on a slight downhill slope, but for the most part, that drive will play all day long. Let's say you get to a tee box and there's no flat area. In this case, I'm on, my feet are below the ball, so it's making me feel like I'm going to hit a hook. Nothing changes. Solar plexus, waggle, stable club face, ball position, waggle, waggle. Notice my stance is now slightly closed because my feet are below the ball, so it's going to promote me getting it down earlier, okay, because gravity is pulling me, so the club's want to go right. So we close our stance to offset that, but it happens naturally. We don't have to think about it. And then from there, we swing. Now the ball goes higher, even though I'm on a downhill slope, and it faded instead of hooking. Okay? So again, the idea is with every club face stability, not control, so that we can swing using inertia, gravity, physics, centrifugal force, and geometry. So the club face does everything for us the way it was designed to do it, instead of us doing anything. So at the end of the day, we give up complete control and we get all of our control back. But there's only one thing you have to master. That's the waggle. So keep at it, guys. Wish you the best of luck.